This is a program that the World Bank has been supporting in sort of a limited capacity through some technical assistance. But we think it has a lot of interesting features for making social programs more inclusive. Just to begin very quickly, some of you may be familiar with this already, but Mission Convergence is a society. It's been established through the Delhi government, founded a few years ago, founded in 2008. With the expressed aim of making Delhi a more inclusive city, specifically with regard to the social programs that operate in the city. First, by helping integrate the existing social security and welfare schemes and improving access to the most vulnerable. And secondly, to improve the delivery of those schemes in a sort of more unified structure. Delhi has more than 40 different social programs spread across 9 different departments. Many of the other smaller cities do not have this range of programs, and in fact, one of the findings is that really, in terms of social programs, it's mostly the centrally sponsored schemes that are available, both in rural and urban environments. Right now, the mission is involved in a few activities, which I'll summarize very briefly. First, they have attempted to undertake a vulnerability survey for all of Delhi to try to identify those who are most vulnerable. Secondly, there is a sort of an organizational structure which has emerged whereby the mission and an interface between these different programs is actually facilitated through NGOs. And these NGOs are basically called gender resource councils. Third, there has been a focus on trying to improve service delivery at the core level. This is happening in a number of ways. One is through an attempt to integrate the administrative data system which is used across all of these programs into one data set that can at least be shared, if not used by each of the different agencies. Secondly, there's an attempt to develop a smart card system. Now, this is popular in a lot of programs and a lot of environments. The attempt here, though, is to actually make a smart card which would work for all of the programs, so that a beneficiary and entitlement holder would have a single card which would then get them access to all of the benefits that they would be entitled to without having to go many different places. And finally, the mission does undertake some service delivery itself, and is in fact the nodal agency for the RSBY, which is the health insurance scheme for the poorest, as well as the SJSRY. Won't spend a lot of time on this, but it just summarizes this structure that I mentioned in the previous slide. And at the bottom you see what are called these GRC agencies. These are in fact NGOs that function at the community level, which provide resources directly to the communities and the households, both in terms of what programs are available, how to apply for those programs. This is a survey that's now been ongoing for about 2 years now, and it's a door-to-door survey of what's deemed to be all potential vulnerable households in Delhi. And it uses those GRCs that we talked about to actually go door-to-door, to go into notified, non-notified slums, Juggi Jhompri colonies, resettlement colonies of different types, to actually interview households and collect data on all of them. This is a very large undertaking, and it's actually still in progress. 2 phases of this have been completed, and a 3rd phase is sort of ongoing at the moment. They have interviewed a little over 9 lakh households. What the mission has proposed is, in fact, 3 sets of variables to help identify vulnerable households. And these can be broken into basically residence. Where does one live? If you live in a non-notified colony, that's probably likely that you're a vulnerable member. A class of variables to look at whether someone is socially vulnerable. And this has to do with whether you have a lot of dependents in the household, whether there are aged dependents, and people with disabilities and other features noted here. And finally, and a lot of debate has surrounded this, whether or not one can use occupation as in fact a definition of vulnerability. As this moves forward, it does have the strong potential to be a unifying feature, to provide a sort of a central registry of those who are vulnerable, which would then allow better integration across programs and better delivery of those households, particularly if one brings in this notion of an e-card linked by the UID. So I've probably gone over, but just to identify a few of the future challenges as this mission and as this work goes forward, and we've highlighted a couple already. How is it that vulnerability is measured? Is that something that can be made concrete? And would it have some relevance across the city and indeed maybe in other settings as well? One of the initial reasons for developing Mission Convergence was this notion of converging the multiple programs that are out there, the 40 programs or so, into a core set of programs, which would be more accountable, which would have greater impetus to deliver. If one looks at the budget among these 40 programs, many are down around 10, 20, 30 lakh type programs. Very small. Some of them are very boutique, depending on the ministry that you're dealing with. So one could question, are these really effective vis-a-vis some of the larger programs? So these are an open set of questions, but we certainly do think it represents an innovative approach, particularly in this social sphere of delivering social benefits, as a way to begin to be more responsive and be indeed more inclusive to those who are vulnerable.